Hey everybody, welcome to For Food's Sake, the podcast bringing you down-to-earth dialogues about the food on your plate and its many impacts on people and the planet. My name is Matteo De Vos, and without further ado, let's talk about food. This week I talk with Iemke Postma, a young entrepreneur in food sustainability, a permaculturist, and a mushroom cultivator. Iemke is currently operations and project manager at Florim, which is a business growing plants, fruits, and vegetables in hydroponic greenhouses for local hotels and restaurants in Cape Verde. He's also currently setting up his own mushroom business in Cape Verde called Cabo Melo. So in this episode, we'll be talking about his journey in food sustainability. We'll talk about how he went from being an ultra skater looking to optimize his nutritional intake to starting a business in mushroom cultivation in Cape Verde. We'll touch upon his adventures with permaculture in northern Thailand and the Netherlands, his time living in a cabin in the woods in Ireland, working for a seed-saving organization, to eventually how he ended up off the coast of West Africa in Cape Verde. Iemke is all about putting sustainability into practice, and so I'm really excited to have him on the show and to hear what he has to say to people that want to live a more sustainable lifestyle. Iemke, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
It's really great having you on the show. Just for the listeners out there, Iemke and I have known each other for the better part of probably 15 years, if not more. We grew up in Thailand together, actually, so it's really nice to have someone on the show that I know, and that, I mean, we lost touch for a little bit, but it's great to have you here, man.
For sure. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. I was just thinking maybe the best way to start off would be, not just for the listener's sake, but for my sake, actually, if you could tell us a little bit more about what you've been up to in the last couple of years. I think one of the great things about this podcast for me has been that once I launched it, a lot of people, including yourself, reached out and, told me you were working with sustainability issues, and I saw, that we had a lot of overlaps. So I think it'd be a great way to start the talk.
Yeah, sure. So, so my name's Iemke Postma. I'm 25 years old. I'm currently operations and project manager for a greenhouse project in Cape Verde. Cape Verde's a country off the west coast of Africa. So I got there also in a random way. But at the moment, I'm venturing into mushroom cultivation here as sort of my main enterprise, and I have lots of other crazy ideas, but that's sort of the main thing I'm diving into and investing most of my time and energy into.
Right, cool.
So,
and so, before we get into kind of more about mushroom cultivation, how long have you been in Cape Verde, and maybe what were you doing before? I know you've been involved in sustainability for longer than just Cape Verde, right?
Yeah. So it started. So I started getting into sustainability through food. So people get into it in different ways. I got into it through nutrition, because back in 2011, sort of when I started studying at university, I was really into ultra skating, which is basically skating on a longboard for 24 hours.
Nice.
And nutrition is an important aspect of that when you're competing and you want to go for a record.
Sure.
So I started following this paleo style diet by Mark Sisson, and he's got a book called The Primal Blueprint.
Okay.
Which really focuses on like that paleo style lifestyle, and that sort of really resonated with who I was, and sort of resonated with my understanding of what it is to be human, and sort of this primal thing that I had inside me that sort of, and it to me, it was just something intuitive, because we evolved from a sort of hunter-gatherer type lifestyle, and
right.
And it's something that I could tune into very easily. So then that sort of led to, from like looking at food from a nutritional point of view, I started looking at, well, where does my food actually come from?
Right.
Because we have no idea, the supermarket, a lot of the time, where our food comes from, it's growing, or the circumstances.
Definitely. Yeah.
Food today is like I'm guessing like I'm 50% less nutritious. So like food today is 50% less nutritious than it was 100 years ago. I read something today that like the magnesium content of apples dropped by more than 80%, because of the way we produce our food. So like having these thoughts in mind to escape the system. I want to escape and become more independent. And I was really into like survivalism and homesteading. These concepts sort of appeal to me a lot because you secure your own future, you secure your own food. That independence, that sovereignty. I really crave that. So I started to experiment with that, and I wanted to know how much land does one need to survive.
Right.
How much land do you need to grow everything you need, and sort of started exploring these issues.
Started exploring them at university or in practice, or how did you go about doing that?
So I tried to do that via sort of the formal route.
Right.
So I had an exchange to Australia for 6 months. To the University of Melbourne, where I had the chance to take other courses outside of my faculty. So I tried to take some ecology classes and agriculture in that field, but it just didn't work out because the campus was in a different place than my business campus, where I was supposed to take some core courses.
Right.
So that didn't work out. But I still sort of was interested in survivalism. I started visiting. I tried to visit some permaculture farms there, but on a very, very sort of shallow level.
Right.
So that sort of it was a slow start, but I started that's sort of where the seed got planted and started developing. And exactly, and that sort of and then in 2013 I got back to Holland to finish off my bachelor and write my thesis, etc. But I just wasn't feeling it. I was trying all these other things like entrepreneurial projects.
Right.
Like in my first year of university, I was like, the reason I studied business was because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to start my own business, do my own thing.
Yeah.
And so in the last year of my university, I was still doing stuff because in the first year of my university, I set up a business called the Students Card, which basically was a card that allows students to get a discount on different businesses. So like at McDonald's, they would get like a 2-for-1 for something, something like that. But for me, that sort of went against my whole principles because I was like, I don't want to stimulate that sort of that consumerism.
Yeah.
And
on the one hand, you're learning about the paleo diet, and on the other hand, you're promoting McDonald's. Yeah, they're not always mutually. They're not always compatible.
Exactly. So I was like, okay, there's got to be another way, to make business or do your business. So I was really into like sustainability. What is sustainability? How do you make a sustainable business? Well, what is that?
Yeah.
So that started rolling also at the same time. So in 2013, in my last year, I started feeling, I had a lot of courses that were open. And my motivation was losing for university. So I was like, okay, well, I'll split it up. I'll take an extra year for university, and I'll travel for 6 months to see, to do something different, to see what I can do. So I went back to Thailand to live in my parents' house for a while, and I traveled around Thailand as well, and Cambodia.
Yeah.
But I took my first permaculture design course in Thailand, in Takom Pai, which is near Pai in the north of Thailand.
Yeah.
So that was sort of my first immersion into permaculture and sort of my first experience, and that really opened my eyes because I started learning things about like soil, about plants, about sunlight.
Yeah.
Just like some just basic concepts that you would imagine a child should know.
Right.
And these we're just not taught these kind of things at school.
Not at all.
And so that motivated me to also spread this knowledge to kids. So I went back to the school that I went to, so the International School of the Regents, just called the Regents now, I guess. But so I went back there to do like volunteer teaching for kids.
Okay.
And coordinated like a gardening activity to teach kids about composting. And we had an activity where we grew tomatoes. So I got the kids all different, little containers where they could grow tomatoes at home, and just gave them a bit of theory about permaculture.
Yeah.
And it was good because like you had half the class weren't really that motivated, but the other half was like super motivated. They got their hands dirty in the compost,
Yeah.
even though it was raining outside. They were like, no, we want to go work in the field. I prepared this quiz because it was raining. So
Right.
and wanted to work in the farm. So I was like, okay, sure, let's go to the garden and do stuff. So I
Yeah.
was super,
Get your
super
hands
happy about
dirty.
it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, kids love being outside and getting dirty as well. I mean, that's just part of their nature, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's great
and
to start young. It's a shame. Yeah, it's a shame that it's not really a topic you're taught, and how to kind of be independent in that sense at all, and in most schools at least.
exactly. So that's something that I want to promote as well, especially for younger people.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's why I also wanted to see like if teaching was something cut out for me. And I do see, like, I do enjoy teaching and giving workshops to people. I've given a few workshops now as well. And regarding permaculture.
Right. And so, I mean, to someone that's, I guess, completely new to permaculture, I mean, how would you sum it up? What is permaculture? What makes permaculture different, for example, from traditional farming?
Okay, so there's a very simple definition for permaculture, and it basically says permaculture is an ethical design science. Okay. So it's very broad. It doesn't just include food, but also it takes into account energy. It looks into just holistic approaches to culture. So right. So the word permaculture comes from the words permanent agriculture, but now it has evolved more to mean permanent culture in a way too, because it talks about the permanence of the human culture. Basically, how can we create our culture, our society, so that it can last, so that it become permanent?
Right.
And sustainability in that sense, it's about creating more energy than you use. So if you compare that to, for example, industrial agriculture, there was one example. I think I'm like, it was something like you use 5 calories of oil to create 1 calorie of food.
Right.
Which you're destroying energy. You're destroying value. And because like a lot of these industrial agricultural processes, they're very very oil intensive, by using chemicals, by using heavy machinery,
all these monocrops like corn and,
exactly. And sort of that's the problem with industrial agriculture, that eventually we're going to run out of oil and we're going to have to look for alternatives. And permaculture does the opposite. So basically you put in 1 calorie of energy and you get 5 calories out, at least because of the way you can harness energy through carbon. Trees are basically, or forests are sort of like the prime example of sustainability. Forests have been here around for forever,
right?
And it's the way forests, they harness energy through photosynthesis. So they get energy from the sun and they store it in the ground, in the wood. That's all carbon. So that's also the way we can combat, for example, global warming, planting more trees,
right?
Building more forests. And this is one of the concepts of permaculture as well, is food forests. So that you create sort of like a biodiverse area with different species of trees and different layering, for example, with bushes and trees, and you have your ground cover. So you have all these different species interacting and harmonizing with each other to create a sort of synergistic area.
Right.
It's a synergistic relationship. And the benefits also goes to humans, because we can harvest the fruits, we can take the seeds, we can so that's it's a very inclusive system,
right?
permaculture.
Yeah, I mean, it overlaps as well with I've read a little bit about holistic livestock management. So the idea that you use different animals and different systems to kind of complement one another. That like cow pads are then, kind of, you bring in the chickens after the cows, and you rotate you have like a rotational grazing system, and you essentially, every organism has its role to play in this ecosystem. And by doing so, instead of, you no longer have to rely on pesticides, you no longer have to rely on antibiotics, because the kind of diseases and all the problems you get with industrial livestock systems disappear, right? I mean, that's the whole idea.
Exactly. Because pathogens, they get confused when there's like different species in the same area, because then they can't jump from one species to another so easily. Because if, for example, if you have a monoculture of pigs or of anything,
right?
The problem is, once a disease starts to go from one plant or one animal, it can easily spread to the other because they're identical, basically. Right. And if you create a biodiverse environment, you counter that by letting the environment evolve towards the problem, and letting nature solve the problem, basically.
Right.
And so, also minimize risks. So,
yeah. So did you work with this then in Holland at all, with permaculture? I mean, in practice, or what happened after you came back from Thailand?
Exactly. So after I came back from Thailand, I started, I was like, okay, I've got all this theory, but I need to put it into practice. Otherwise it's just going to waste. Yeah. So the first thing I did, I looked for a community garden, and I just started, just saying, okay, I'm gonna go to this garden, and I'm just gonna go here every week and, do my thing. And basically I quickly took on a leadership role, because I had all this knowledge. And I sort of knew the theory behind everything,
right?
Which I could share, and then because of that, I became the crop planning coordinator of the garden within like a month or two or something like that. Because also every week I would go there, and eventually I would basically tell people what we're planting and basically what we're harvesting. So. So that evolved into that, and at the same time, I had to also finish my university, so I was studying for that, and I also took another PDC, so a permaculture design course online, with a guy called Jeff Lawton, who is one of the world's most renowned permaculturists, and I got a lot of knowledge through his online PDC course as well.
Okay. And I mean, for those that aren't very familiar with permaculture, I mean, is this something that you can, because when you talk about forests, and when you talk about these kind of systems, I think a lot of people might think of, you needing an enormous space. Is it something that you can also do in an urban environment on on a micro level? Can you have smaller permaculture designs that are appropriate for people living in cities, or for people that want to experiment with it but don't have enough space?
I think there is room for that, especially that's how I started, basically. I mean, I lived in a city, and I wanted to grow my own food, and I had to figure out how to do that.
Right.
So I guess there's some things you can do on a balcony that's easy, like herbs and things like that. But if you really want to produce like potatoes or something, there are ways to do it on a balcony. But like hauling dirt up, 5 stories,
it's not ideal.
Yeah, like I've done it as well, but it's not ideal. It's not ideal. So there's a really good farmer. His name is Curtis Stone. He's got a lot of YouTube videos, and he's one of my idols as well, I guess, because he takes such a practical approach to urban farming.
Right.
He's very, very business minded as well. So and I really like that, because people forget sort of like, the people that are really urban farming, they have to live off it. So
right.
You got to approach it like a business.
Right.
And so, like for me, when I was living in a city, the best way that I could learn about, first of all, gardening and apply my theory just to join a community garden, because there are other people that are there as well that are sort of, have the same mindset. I want to grow food. You learn from each other. You talk to people. You increase your network, and sometimes like I design my own plot there as well, because they gave me the freedom to do so, and it's like a playground. You can do anything.
Right.
So I designed a three sister garden, which is basically a three sister technique or thing. It comes from actually a Native American system of agriculture, and basically it involves corn, beans, and pumpkins, or squash, whatever. So just like a squash type, pumpkin type plant, and they work in synergy with each other. So what happens is the corn, it grows into a stalk and provides carbohydrates for people. The corn. The corn, and the beans, they're climbers, so they climb around the stalk of the maize, which gives the corn strength against the wind. Allows the beans to get more sunlight because it can climb up. The beans are also a leguminous species, which means that they fix nitrogen from the air into the ground. Which is available for other plants to use. So they're also helping the corn and the squash, the squash basically it's a vining plant. So what it does, it's a live mulch, as we say. So basically, it has really big leaves and it's kind of thorny. So it discourages predators from taking the corn or the beans. And also because it has such big leaves, like it prevents evaporation from water to escape the earth, the soil, basically. So it keeps the soil moist. So these three species combined you call it a three sister garden, and it's a sort of like almost a perfect example of permaculture and how these three species work in synergy in symbiosis with each other to create more than they could just do in a monoculture, for example.
Yeah. That is so cool. I had no idea that, I knew that's kind of what permaculture was about, but I never knew that there were, examples so kind of small, but still significant. Just three vegetables working in synergy to provide like a little mini permaculture. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly. And this method it's very common also in Cape Verde. Like if you go around the countryside, you'll see this used a lot. In the beginning, I only saw like corn and beans as sort of and without squash, but now I was starting to see like pumpkins being used. So they're really applying this technique here as well, which is for me is really exciting to see, because there's a lot of good permaculture examples here in Cape Verde too. Yeah,
and so I guess moving on to Cape Verde, then you moved there. When did you move to Cape Verde?
So that was last year in April. Getting there was a whole another story. So I moved around a lot. I went to before that I was also in Ireland for 2 months. Working on a seed saving farm. I started a seed saving organization in Amsterdam, which focuses on like seed saving, like our like old species of vegetables, like forgotten species, basically.
Oh wow!
I was like sort of like the secretary on the board of that organization.
Let's get into that first. This is
exactly. So that was let's see. Because basically when I came back from Thailand, I lived in Amsterdam for a bit. I went to that community garden and started applying permaculture. I got my online PDC. And then I was homeless for a while because strange situation, because my parents, they moved back to Malaysia, and they sort of gave up the apartment that I was living in, and I didn't know what to do with my life at that point. I didn't finish my university yet, so I sort of still had to stay, but I didn't know where I could go. And so I was living in a tent for a while. It was the summer, so it wasn't cold. I was living in a tent at my community garden and just like harvesting what I was getting.
The ultimate test, the real survival.
Yeah, exactly. And also, but also relying on friends for housing as well. So like I had two friends which gave me their rooms for a while.
Right.
So that was good because it was pouring at some points as well. But then at the point I decided to go to Ireland because a friend of mine, or my seed saving chairperson, sent my CV out to like 250 different organizations, and one of them that replied back was the Irish Seed Saving Association, and so I went there to live there for 2 months.
And so for forgotten vegetables, what what does that even?
So for example, you get a cucumber. For example, I'm just naming something. And in the supermarket, you usually see like one or two species of cucumber. I think this was covered in one of your talks, your podcast as well. But anyway, so like when you go in the supermarket, you get like one species of cucumber usually. But in reality, there's a whole bunch of different species out there.
Exactly.
And actually, we've lost a lot of our species because of the way that industrial agriculture pushes for the ultimate species, or like and also a lot of these species are hybrids, so you can't seed save them. So they're called F1 hybrids because they're like first generation. And like companies like Monsanto, they do that to get more money, because if you're reliant on their seeds, that you have to buy their seeds every time. That's money for them. So that's a way they do business. And so a lot of our biodiversity has been lost in the last 50 to 100 years. Like we've lost maybe I don't know the exact numbers, but I think maybe over 80% of our biodiversity has been lost because we stopped seed saving. And this is dangerous, because we're putting a lot of power in the hands of a few corporations which hold this sort of genetic diversity.
Right.
And we're losing we're losing other species which may be beneficial in the future and can adapt perhaps better to different diseases better than So that's why seed saving for me was also an important issue, and to increase our biodiversity and have a lot of species. So there's a lot of these kind of organizations which focus on seed saving and promoting open source seeds, so to speak,
right?
Which can be reproduced, which can be seed saved, and not patented.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what I was working on with Seed Savers NL, and also in Ireland. That's what the Irish Seed Savers Association was also doing. So I was interested in that, and that is why I went to that farm in Ireland and lived in an off-the-grid cabin for 2 months. Chopping my own wood, making my own fire. Really like primitive. Like the only entertainment I had was my guitar and maybe a few books and just looking at the stars at night, and the nature around me. So that was sort of a moment for me as well to find sort of something inside of me to explore my mind, and
That's pretty cool. And then eventually you moved to Cape Verde.
So like I came back from Ireland and I had to again restart my studies because I had to finish off my studying. So I decided to live in my university city of Rotterdam, and that's where I made the connection of Cape Verde. So coming back from the Irish countryside, I was completely like shocked by the city as well. Like everything around me was man-made,
right?
And
out of the cabin in the woods, and
exactly. And then had some getting used to there as well. But my neighbors they had connections to Cape Verde as well, and they were super friendly. They were always like inviting me like over to have like some dinner or something, or eat with them. And like I would have like these problems or something. I was like, maybe like a bit down or something. And I would go to them, drink a tea, and I would talk about it. And they were just very open and very warm towards me. And we just sort of started developing this friendship. And then but I was still like working on permaculture stuff. So Yeah, that was at the start of 2015, basically. So then I set up an organization called Permaculture Rotterdam, in which basically what I wanted to do was organize permablitzes, which basically means you go to an empty lot or people's houses where they have a garden, and transform that into sort of like a food producing space, a food producing garden, using permaculture principles. So that's sort of what the organization I created was dedicated to. Cool. And I was still like very interested in urban permaculture, and I was like, well, this house I'm living in doesn't have a lot of light. What would grow well here? So like I was thinking of, okay, could you grow something on the rooftop maybe, but
right.
I would still not have enough light. And I was thinking, wait a second, like mushrooms. I think mushrooms, like, they don't need a lot of light, and you can probably grow them anywhere, basically, as long as you have water. You probably don't need so much. So I took my first workshop, like professional mushroom growing workshop at the Rotterdam, which is a Dutch company who grows oyster mushrooms on coffee waste. So they collect coffee waste from like different points throughout the city, like restaurants, cafes, and then they grow mushrooms on it. And so I was really interested in this concept of basically creating more value out of a waste product.
Right.
And I took a workshop with them and learned the basics of growing mushrooms.
Yeah, because I know coffee's really wasteful, isn't it? I mean, in terms of the energy you get out of it compared to what you put in.
Yeah, exactly. So when you're making coffee, basically you're using 2% of the nutrition in the coffee bean. So 98% of that nutrition gets wasted. So if you reutilize that waste instead of burning it, right. You can create something like mushrooms, which has more value. And it's a concept actually from the Blue Economy by Gunther Pauli. Okay. He's also a circular economy thinker. Also big name in sort of circular economy, cradle concepts. But so mushrooms, and I was like, that's exciting. Let's start to experiment with this. And so using also my permaculture knowledge, I sort of thought like, okay, well, I've got my nitrogen, which is coffee waste, but I also need carbon. So what they did, and in the workshop I used to learn straw. They use straw as their carbon source. Okay. And I was like, in a city I can't get straw that easy. It's not really used. So I was like, okay, what other material has carbon in it? So I came to the conclusion that I could use newspaper, because people read newspaper. Newspaper is made out of paper. The ink usually is based, I think because of European legislation, the ink has to be based on biodegradable material. Okay. So it's based on soybean, which is probably GMO, but besides, at least it's biodegradable. Right. So I started experimenting with that by growing mushrooms on newspaper and coffee waste, and that worked fine. So that was a successful experiment. But the thing is, I couldn't scale it up. I didn't have sort of the means or the area to scale this project up.
Is this something you just did in your apartment?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's something I did in my small apartment, and I had 2 roommates with me. Right. That was just an experiment that I did. But I shared those mushrooms with my neighbors who were from Cape Verde. I was like, hey, I've got like 2 kilograms of mushrooms. I should probably share them with people around me. And so I gave them to my neighbors, and they made like tom kha soup with it.
Oh, and, fantastic!
It's really good for that as well. And it was really good. And then my Cape Verdean neighbor, he got really excited. I was like, hey, wait a second. They don't have that in Cape Verde. Nobody's doing this in Cape Verde. And so he started talking to me like, what do you think about coming to Cape Verde and doing this? And I was totally open to it. I was like, okay, let's go. Let's see.
Move to Cape Verde.
Yeah, where is Cape Verde exactly? Exactly. I never heard about Cape Verde before I met my neighbors, and so so it started exploring that, and so at the end of 2015, we planned a little trip with an organization as well who helped entrepreneurs find their ground in Cape Verde. So we joined them for 1 week, and then the rest of the 3-4 weeks we did our own exploration in the other islands. So at that time I explored Santiago, Sal, San Vicente, and Santo Antão. So it probably doesn't say anything to you.
No,
but
these are surrounding islands, I guess, around Cape Verde, or
no, Cape Verde's an archipelago basically.
Right.
So
okay.
Off the west coast of Africa.
Yeah.
So it's a collection of islands. And I visited. They have 10 islands, and at the time I visited four of the 10. And
to explore what permaculture opportunities they had, or specifically mushrooms, or
specifically mushrooms, because it's a product that they don't have here, at least in a fresh form.
Right.
Everything here has to be imported from other countries, and like most of the mushrooms here are from tin or can. And so I saw an opportunity to introduce something that's that they don't have here, and to create more value, and to create a more sovereign Cape Verde by getting them to produce their own food.
Right.
So I saw the ecological benefit of it, I saw the social benefit of it, and I saw the economical benefit of it, because I was looking at a niche. Nobody's doing this. I could be the first, and having that first mover advantage, and also there's a lot of hoops that I need to go through to be able to do this, and it's not easy, and I'm really realizing that, but just going at it at this moment as well.
It's not based on coffee, this one, and on newspaper? I mean, what are you using as your source of waste?
So what they're growing in Cape Verde a lot is sugarcane, because one of the main export products as well for Cape Verde is grog, which is sort of like a rum. So it's alcohol based off sugarcane, and the waste of this production is bagasse, which sometimes they burn for fuel, or they use it for mulch for their goats or things.
Okay.
But I think there are more effective ways to use this, which is one of the ways is to grow mushrooms on them. And so that's sort of my business idea at the moment, to do that. And so I've contacted a few people who are willing to give me the bagasse for free. I'm now in talks with the agriculture minister to allow me to import spore and things like that, and to be able to produce here. So there's a lot of legislative, there's a lot of bureaucratic loopholes that I need to go through before I can do this, because nobody's ever done it. They don't even know like how it's done. So I have to explain to them the process. I need to explain to them the risks involved,
right?
And basically write up a whole project to explain to them this is good for your country, and you want this. It's just there's a lot of opportunity here for people that do have ideas and do have sort of like a vision to start something. It's also, you have to sort of roll with the culture. The culture is a difficult thing to adjust to. But that's something that I'm dealing with as well. And my girlfriend, I guess, she's teaching at the university. She's also experiencing this, that the culture is sort of, it's different than what you're used to. But you have to roll with that. So, I think we're getting off the food topic at this point.
No, but it sounds pretty great. I mean, especially the entrepreneurial spirit, and that you keep, you've gotten involved in so many different sustainability issues. It's interesting that you're now, working on mushrooms. It's something that really fascinates me too, because as far as I'm aware, they don't just. So I've heard the coffee waste example, for instance. I think there's a German company, or at least a a chain, a franchise called Cheetos Mushrooms, which I think started in Africa and then branched out, and now there's a German one which uses coffee waste as well. But I've also heard that, with mushrooms, it can be used against crude oil. It's been used even for pesticides, for breaking down plastics. I mean, in terms of sustainability, it's really got everything, and it's so misunderstood. I mean, fungi in general, fungi. I never know how to pronounce it. I mean, and I think that's something that's super interesting to introduce to different areas.
For sure. So like this guy that I'm getting most of my information from, his name is Paul Stamets.
Right.
He's sort of like, if mushroom was a religion, he would be the Pope. And I have his Bible, so I saw a video of him the other day, and people ask him, it was like after the Fukushima disasters, like Paul, what would you do? So he found this mushroom, which basically hyper accumulates cesium-137, I believe.
Okay.
Into a mushroom, and through doing so, like a
radioactive mushroom.
Exactly. But it concentrates that into the mushroom so that the environment, what do you call it? Like rehabilitates, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And so like there's so many crazy things that mushroom can do. It's like what you said as well, like breaking down plastics, turning hydrocarbons into carbohydrates, so making them edible. So for cleaning oil spills, for example, Paul did an example with that as well by getting these sort of floating bags with mycelium in it and letting them float on these oil covered waters, and the mushrooms would grow and basically break down the hydrocarbons. And there's so many ways to use mushrooms, and I'm just a noob when it comes to that. I'm very focused on this just one thing that I'm doing right now, because that's my income stream. That's sort of how I'm planning to make my money.
But that's the beauty of it, right? I mean, it's that it's applicable to so many situations. I mean, whether it's sugarcane in Cape Verde or oil spills. I mean, I read an example. There was like a coastal spill in California, and they basically laid down these large mats of woven human hair first to collect the oil, to kind of, I guess, like soak it up. And then afterwards they treated that kind of, I don't know, whatever it was, that huge mat with oyster mushrooms and with straw. And then within a few weeks you had this kind of broken down, mats into soil that was clean enough, to be taken away. So that's really incredible how it's so applicable to so many different situations, and how kind of misunderstood it is. And I think that's the beauty of it, though, right? I mean, that it's so it's so widely, you can use it for so many things. People making like packaging out of it as well, and it's so exactly like with hemp as well. There's like 10,000 different uses for hemp, which is also something I was really interested in. My sister, Iemke Postma, is also working to create sustainable clothing using hemp or bamboo fabrics, and also I think she's also looking into recycling fish nets captured from the sea into clothing as well. So I mean, there's mushrooms is just one aspect, but there's so many different ways that we can approach these environmental issues. For me, from your story in a nutshell, I think that's kind of the message, right? And I mean, it's that like whatever you're into. I mean, you came at this first from a completely different angle. You came from longboarding and looking at how you could kind of like amplify your nutritional intake, and here you are cultivating mushrooms in Cape Verde. Exactly. I think that's the wider point, right? It's that and that's totally what this podcast is about too. It's about helping people find their way that they can contribute. I mean, in this case, through food, doing their part in kind of living a more sustainable life. And I think you're, and this is why I wanted you on the podcast, is, you're a living example of that. And you've kind of shown that over time, it can change course, and you can You can adjust course, but you can stay in the kind of sustainable route. It's a philosophy. It's not
Right.
one, you know.
Exactly. And I think if you really go for it as well, like people are willing to help. Because like that's how I got my current job as well. Like how I'm financing myself here is basically I was looking for finance for this mushroom project. I was like I was in Holland. I was like I need to have some starting capital to start there. And so I started looking for people who would be willing to finance it. And instead, this guy was like, okay, well, I don't have money for you, but I might have a job for you. And so that's how I rolled into this position that I'm in now. And yeah, living off this income until the end of March when my contract ends, in which case I really need to get my business going. But
So just
at the meantime,
yeah, no, I don't think we touched upon this. What is it? I mean, you're a project manager right now. What is it exactly that you're doing?
yeah. So well, it's a bit complicated because I started this contract in March. End of March, April 2016, because I was looking for finance for my mushroom business and instead got offered this job. So I went to the interview was super smooth. They needed someone who knew a bit about agriculture. I also had a business background, so they really liked that. And so they were very quick about sending me here to basically manage this project, which is they were building a 1 hectare greenhouse, hydroponic greenhouse, to create vegetables, fruits, and flowers for the local hotels and restaurants.
Okay.
So not exactly permaculture, but it gave me the means to stay here on the ground.
Right.
And it gave me sort of an opportunity to get to know the Cape Verdean culture, learn the language, increase my network, and so that gave me opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had. I'm just working on the mushrooms now and making. Yeah, I just finished recently my lab, so I built a low-tech lab to so that I have a sterile area to work in, where I can basically reproduce the spawn that I'm hoping to import from the Netherlands. Because I'm probably going to get the best deal there. The Dutch government also has expressed interest in subsidizing a venture, but I need to come up with a good plan, like a good business plan. At the moment, like I'm just bootlegging it, using my own funds to buy the materials I need, to invest in the business, and I'm gonna hope it flies. But just keep working at it, try to convince the local authorities that
the life of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I suppose. So that's something that's what I'm working on now, basically. So it's a lot of just legislative stuff, but also just practical. I've never built a lab before with my own hands, but you just learn as you go, and that's
by
also,
doing. That's what it's all
by
about.
doing. That's it. And and knowing like sort of. Yeah, like Curtis Stone. So I mentioned him before. He's very market orientated. So he looks for like, okay, what does the market want? What are people gonna buy? And produce that rather than focusing on I'm gonna produce this and trying to sell that. But so I saw this opportunity for mushrooms just because nobody was doing it. So I immediately just saw a niche that I could target. Yeah. And I'm sort of betting on that to work. But people.
It's a good bet. Mushrooms seem to have a lot to offer. So.
Exactly. Just keep at it and go for it and don't look back. And that's it.
That's great. Yeah. I thought that would be a great note to finish on in terms of, your philosophy and everything you've been doing. What would be, I guess, for people that are interested in sustainability and kind of looking back at where you've come from, what would be your advice to people that want to tap into sustainability from whichever direction? What would you say to them?
Yeah, well, like you said, learn by doing. So just get involved. Join a community garden, start growing stuff at your house. Start go woofing. Woofing is a great one. So woofing is worldwide opportunities on organic farms, which basically allows you to volunteer on these different farms whilst they provide accommodation for you and food. Sometimes you also get a bit of an allowance, and that's a way to also get to find out what you want and if that works for you. So just get your hands dirty, and sort of the rest will follow. That's sort of my takeaway message here.
That's great. It'd be cool if I could. I mean, for my Learn by Doing initiative, it'd be really cool if I could grow mushrooms, for example, in my room, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things I mentioned was that kit from Rotterdam.
Right.
So what they do is they sell these kits where you can put in your own coffee grinds, coffee waste, and basically grow mushrooms on it. I hope you're gonna put the link in your description, whatever.
Yeah, I'll do that.
But then that's a really very, very practical way to sort of interact with that as well, and to reuse your waste in a sort of practical form.
So I can just, sorry to interrupt, I can just literally, my fresh coffee waste, I can just dump it on some newspaper. And I mean, what's the kind of process here? Just to quickly talk me through it.
I think it's just pure coffee waste. I'm not sure. I've never actually used one of these kits, but the theory is you put the coffee waste in, and you probably need some kind of carbon source as well. But sometimes even coffee filter paper is enough to do that. I think they even recommended it to if you have Nespresso pads, you can use that as well. And and just layer it with the substrate, with the spawn basically, which they sell, and then after a while you see mushrooms growing out of your coffee waste. So it's important that your coffee waste is fresh, so no older than 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
Because that doesn't give a chance for other microorganisms to grow on it, such as competing fungi, such as the trichoderma, which is sort of the biggest problem with mushroom production. It's the trichoderma are sort of like the fungus you see when you get moldy bread,
right?
For example, with green. And that's those spores are all around us all the time. So you have to make sure that you inoculate your substrate with other mushrooms before these mushrooms this fungi gets the chance.
All right,
to do
so
that.
My mushrooms have got to win, basically. That's the
exactly, and that's how you plant a garden as well, basically, because how weeds form is because they occupy a niche that other plants are not taking. So if you're planting species which occupy that niche before the weeds do, then you're growing the plants that you want instead of the weeds that you don't want. So it's all about space and energy, and
And so I mean, just might sound like a stupid question, but I mean, my first thought is I don't want to, put out some newspaper in my room and end up causing some kind of biohazard where, I don't know, I just have a bunch of mold growing at the edge of my windowsill. I mean, what are there any things to watch out for that my little mushroom experiment is going terribly wrong and I should probably throw it away, or are these definitely edible, or I mean, what should I look out for?
Yeah, so one of the problems, like I mentioned, is the trichoderma. If they inoculate the substrate before the mushrooms do, so if the mushrooms get the chance first, then that's fine. But I think you'll see the effects, just visually you'll see green molds forming.
Right.
So it's what I try to do is just cut them out and sort of cheat my way into making sure that the only the mushroom I want grows. If you work with, you have to work with a good substrate. I mean, I've grown my fair share. I've grown my own psychedelic mushrooms as well,
Right.
and then you really have to work with very, very sterile substrate, and it's a bit more complex because you need to take more care, sort of. That's also something you can do. You can also buy a psychedelic mushroom kit. Actually, that's how I started as well. In university, I grew my own psychedelic mushrooms. And
now it all makes sense why you're into mushroom growing.
Exactly. So,
I think I'll start off with a beginner's kit. I mean, I don't want to, jump ahead. I feel like if I can grow some standard mushrooms by myself, I'll be proud.
Yeah, so the oyster mushrooms are usually the typical ones that are grown on coffee waste.
Great. Okay, I'll
Yeah,
definitely give that a try for my next learn by doing
cool.
experiment. Growing
Sounds good.
mushrooms in the
I'm looking
apartment.
forward to
I hope
it.
my housemate didn't hear that. Well,
Yeah,
Imke, thanks so much for this talk. It's been awesome catching up.
sweet, sweet. Thanks for having
It's been a
me.
decade. Yeah. I'll be sure
Yeah,
to I'll be sure to check up on how it's going, and maybe in a couple of months we can have you back on the show and see how it's going.
sure. That sounds good. That sounds good.
All
Yeah.
right. If you want to know more about permaculture or about mushroom cultivation that Iemke was talking about, be sure to check out the links in the description below. And of course, if you like this episode, be sure to follow us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. And of course, you can subscribe via iTunes, leave a review, and rate it to support the podcast. Or you can do it the old fashioned way and just share it with friends and family that you think might be interested. So, in next week's episode, I'll be talking to Dr. Dennis van Engelsdorp, who's a professor of entomology at the University of Maryland in the United States. We'll be talking about bees and the vital role that bees play in food systems and sustainability, but also we'll be looking at the mystery behind their alarming disappearance in recent years. All right, that's it for now. I'll see you next week.